Hello, guys. I want to talk to you this week about winning the battle in our minds. And I think, especially as women, this is something that we need to be constantly reminded of. I think that this is something that we can never hear too much about what God's word says about this subject. So, first of all, we have to realize that the enemy, he is walking around looking to he wants to devour us with, by using thoughts, ideas, suggestions, just entertaining things in our mind. And if we do not know how to come against those thoughts, then we literally can feel paralyzed by our thought life. And so it's so important that we understand and know that God did not leave us without an answer on this subject. He wants us to be equipped. He gave us what we need, but we have to choose to use it, right? So we can be equipped. We can use the word. That is our weapon, the sword of the Spirit, right? Read about the armor of God in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 17. I encourage you to go check that out and just be reminded again of the different pieces of the armor that we have. So in there, it talks about these different pieces of armor. So when we think of armor, we think of metal armor, right? As protection. But for us, our armor is having that knowledge of the word, to be armed with the truth of what God's word says, so that we can have victory in our thought life. So I think there are 4 things that I want to tell you that we can do to win the battle in our mind. Number 1, and I'm going to try to go quicker and stay on track. So I wrote down my notes here of what I want to say. So number 1 is we want to identify it. Number 2 is we want to quench it. Number 3 is we want to capture it. And number 4 is we want to maintain it. So number 1, identify it. So, when we have a thought come into our mind, that's the first thing we have to do kind of in our line of defense, is we have to identify the thought. And when you are identifying the thought, you want to do, it's kind of like you're going to do an investigation. Well, when you investigate something, you ask questions, right? So you have to ask questions about these thoughts and these things that are trying to fill up space in your head. Are they friend or are they foe? Do they speak life or do they speak death? What do these thoughts line up with? Do they line up with the word? Going back to, again, that's everything goes back to the word. If it doesn't line up with the word, if these thoughts and these things that I'm thinking about myself, about my situation, about what I should do, whatever it is, if they don't line up with the word, if they don't line up with God's character or what God says about who I am in him, if they don't, then they are dangerous and I need to get rid of them. I don't need to give them any more space in my mind, okay? Because thoughts become our behavior, right? So if we keep entertaining these things that don't line up with the word, then they, lead us down a not good road. So that's number 1, is identify. Number 2 is quench it. So when we quench it, think about the word quench. We want to quench our thoughts. So quench means to extinguish. And you think about a fire. A fire is extinguished when you have to cut off the the fuel source, right? So the fuel source of our thoughts is attention. What is fueling our thoughts is when we give them attention. So if it's a thought that is, going back to number 1, if it's a thought that's a foe, if it's a thought that does not line up with the word, that does not need to be entertained in my head, then I need to quench it by extinguishing it. I need to cut off the fuel source, and that means I need to give it no more attention. I don't need to give that thought any more entertainment. I don't need to keep thinking about it and replaying it in my head any longer. It does not, it doesn't deserve to be there. So I wrote this down. and here, so when you turn your attention away from a thought and onto other things, replacing it with something else, that is what you want to do, right? So you have to replace it or renew your mind. Romans 12:2 says that we are to don't be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So how do you renew your mind? You have to replace the way you think with the way God thinks, what God says about you, what God says about in his word, about who we are in him, about how things are to be, right? So you have to do that. So that's number 2 is quench it. So number 3 is capture it. So those thoughts, when we determine that, number 1, we've investigated, we've figured it out, this thought is a foe, I'm going to quench it, I'm going to extinguish it, I don't want to give it any more inner space in my mind, I'm not going to entertain it and keep thinking about it, I'm going to take it captive, because one of 2 things is going to happen. Your thoughts are going to take you captive, or you are going to take your thoughts captive. So you have to choose. It doesn't just come naturally, because again, the Bible tells us we have to renew our mind. So again, we have to change our way of thinking. It's not natural for us to think the way that God thinks. We have to choose to get in a pattern of doing that. So you're going to take your thoughts captive, or they're going to take you captive. So capture those thoughts. 2 Corinthians 10:5, Paul wrote, was writing that, and he told us to take every thought captive, and it has to bow to the obedience of Christ. So again, lining up, get rid of it. If it doesn't line up with what God's word says, then you don't want it. Okay, you do not want it. So also, if thoughts speak to us in order to capture us, then we have to speak to them in order to capture them. So you have to, again, remember that how you are winning this battle is using the word as your sword. That is how you are fighting. So just like these thoughts are coming in and saying this and that to you, and you're this, and your situation is this, and whatever it may be that you're hearing in your head, you have to get brave and you have to remember that you're not a little wimp. You're not a little weakling. God made you strong in him, and you have to get bold, and you have to speak back to those thoughts. You have to tell them, right, what God's word says. Oh, I'm hearing this. No, that doesn't line up. God's word says this about me. God's word says this about my situation. You have to take those thoughts captive by replacing them with the truth. So again, that leads us to number 4, because we got to how do we maintain this and get win the battle of our thought life? So once you're trying to replace those negative thoughts or those things that are contrary to the word that come into your mind, you have to know what the word says in order to determine and to speak back to those thoughts, right? And to go against, those things that come into your head, and to replace them with the right stuff. You got to know what the right stuff is. If you don't know the truth, then you will be tricked by your emotions, by your feelings. Again, as women, it can be so hard. So you have to be armed with the truth. You have to know what the word says so that it can change you, so that it can change your thought patterns, and your mind can get in line with what the word says. And when the enemy tries to flood your mind with all this junk and garbage, that you can say, no, I know what the word says, and the word says that I am more than an overcomer. The word says that greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. I feel like this right now, and all these thoughts are coming in about this, and I feel like this, and whatever it is, but God. But the word says this, and I'm not going to let my thoughts take me down this spiral of, of a dangerous place, because again, God does not want that for us. He does not want our minds to be filled that way, because what's in your mind again affects your behavior, and it affects even just how you operate, how you interact with others, your overall health, everything. We know, again, like as women, it really affects us so much. So we have to get the battle won here, and we can do it. We are not left without armor. We are not left without weapons. He gave us what we need. We got to identify it. We got to quench it. We got to capture it. And we have to maintain. Then we have to get into that every day, renewing our mind with the word, so that we can maintain being able to walk continually in victory with the battle over our mind. And so many people have accepted, especially women, have accepted that the battle of the mind and dealing with anxiety and depression and negativity in your mind. So many have just accepted that it's just part of life, and it's just something that we have to deal with, and we just have to find other ways to cope with it. And those are lies. I'm telling you right now, I don't say this lightly, and I don't say it from not experiencing it myself. I'm telling you, and I get fired up about it because I know what it's like to go through hell in your mind and to deal with that. I know personally what it is like, let me tell you. And like I say, I speak angrily about it, because I get fired up, because I know what it's like, and I know that the enemy, he's a liar. He's a liar. He's the father of lies, and he does not have any more authority or power over your mind than you allow him to. So you got to be bold, and you got to step up, and you got to take authority. And also at the same time, when I say all this, don't feel defeated that it's a process, and it takes time. Again, every day choosing to renew your mind. It's a process. It's not, something that you just get it all right, instantly. It takes time. But I just encourage you all that you can do it, and we can stand together, as believers, as women, as friends, and encourage one another, and not have to feel ashamed when we are struggling with it, but help each other through it. So hold each other's arms up when we are feeling down, and remind each other what the word says, and that we can have victory for the battle within our minds. I love you guys, and please know, yes, we can win the battle in our minds by using God's word. So yes, use it. Love you guys.